I'm Alicia Gonzalez, Transportation Planner for the Connecticut Department of Transportation, and I'd like to welcome you to Along the Lines, a podcast series where we have captivating conversations about public transportation in Connecticut and explore current projects and ideas happening at the Connecticut Department of Transportation. The Connecticut Department of Transportation recently launched a new initiative to develop its first ever Customer Experience Action Plan. The action plan will be informed by customer insights and feedback and will help ensure the customer and their experience is influencing and supporting innovation and decision making within the state's public transportation services. I'm really excited to bring this conversation to Along the Lines. Today, we are joined by the Connecticut Department of Transportation Commissioner Joseph Giulietti and Alicia Leite, Transportation Supervising Planner at the department's Bureau of Public Transportation. I'm really excited to bring this conversation to Along the Lines, and we're hoping to learn more about the Customer Experience Action Plan and how it will benefit not only our existing customers, but the entire state of Connecticut. Commissioner Giulietti, Alicia, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Very happy to be here.
So let's start. Commissioner, we are truly honored to have you on our program today for the first time. And can you take a few moments to start us off and just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I was born and raised in New Haven, went to mostly New Haven public school systems, ended up at Southern Connecticut State University. And when they canceled the teaching program in 1971, I had been offered an opportunity to go on with Penn Central. So my background in public trans began as a assistant conductor. We used to call it a trainman back then, locomotive engineer, road foreman. Went down to teach the engineer school and be a trainer and coordinator, superintendent for the New Haven and Harlem lines. Then was sent to an engineering institute, came back to be the engineer of track. Then moved to the capital side to do all the capital investments and the coordination for how we could get work done, providing the least amount of impact on our riders. Went from there to being a trained rumbler brace. Basically, it was a way of looking at a public agency the same way a private company would, and looking at how we can be the most efficient going forward. From there, I left to go down to Florida with a new start that was called Tri-Rail. Became the executive director, changed it from being a rail system to being a regional authority. Was called back after all the accidents in 2013 to be the president of Metro North in 2014, and did a short stint as a consultant with a company called T.Y. Lin. And then I was called by the governor to be a commissioner for the Department of Transportation, which has been both an interesting challenge and a great reward.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. It's quite an impressive trajectory, and we are very fortunate to have you here as our commissioner and to benefit from your expertise. I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to congratulate you on your recent APTA Distinguished Service Award. That is quite the honor, and it's very well deserved. Can you talk a little bit about your experience connecting with customers in your roles at Metro North Railroad, Tri-Rail, and now here at the department as well?
Yeah, I would turn and say that with Metro North, back in we became part of, Conrail became part of Metro North in 1983. And where the expression was at the time that, when you came over from the freight side, the people, we had a chairman at the time who said we inherited the skunks and dogs of Conrail to operate our system. It was very insulting for those of us that had that time. I probably had a little over 10 to 15 years in. But the thought process was that for Conrail, everything was the bottom line. So what you could make, and if people were not very good at the top level in terms of how much money they could net for the company, they moved them onto the public sector side where they were reimbursed for the operation. So if you understood it from that side, you understood what the chairman was trying to bring about. So we now had to turn around and talk about how do you turn around and your focus is not on the bottom line as much as it is to making sure that you've met your customer needs out there. So even back then, we would begin meeting with the public on platforms, talking to the public. I found it, some people are extremely intimidated by it. I happen to really enjoy that. So I would say that translating that going forward, even when I went down to Tri-Rail, there was never a time that I didn't go to a different station or a different county to turn around and either meet with the people on the platform or to talk to the newspapers and editorial boards to turn around and explain what our mission was and what we were trying to get accomplished with a new startup down there. So come back to Metro North, and if you were to take a look at, I was supposed to only come on up and the first week meet the board and go back down to Florida. But instead, I got hit with a snowstorm and ended up right in the middle of Grand Central Terminal with people that were very, very upset because we had suspended service. And then when we started up the service, we were only starting up with one train on each line at a time. And I felt that it was more important that I be down there to explain to the public, who was very, very frustrated and very upset. But you don't want that being carried out to your crews that are out there. And you'd rather that if they have, you know, frustration, they direct that frustration towards you, so that way there you can at least turn around and explain the thinking behind it. Because at that time we were trying to load one train at a time, and we knew if we put out that there was another train, we'd never fill the first train. And I had to load every single train on every single line to maximum capacity to be able to get people home, because the storm had come in between the rush hours and had basically shut us down, and we needed to get a lot of people out there. So I would have said it was an experience for both me and the MTA, because they weren't used to someone who would just walk down in the middle of Grand Central and face an angry crowd. But I don't know what it is that motivates me in the long run to be able to go and do that. But I've generally found that if you're open, candid, and direct with people, they will accept what you're saying, even though they'll yell out that, obscenities and everything else. But you learn to go along with that. And the other end of it is that, giving people an opportunity to say what they'd like, and for you to be able to respond with what you can do, ends up taking a lot of what I'll call the fire out of the arguments that are there. And over time, again, coming back in, I would turn and say that if you were to take a look at the feedback at the time, it ended up being very, very positive. We ended up gaining the public's trust again, and again returning to being one of the safest operations. And even during that time, for me personally, I no sooner had come on in as the president, and the Transportation Committee here in Connecticut turned around and sent me a registered letter, I believe it was registered, demanding that I appear before the Transportation Committee to explain why they should continue to do work with Metro North. And even that, showing up here, meeting with the Transportation Committee, and explaining to them the decisions that we made during that snowstorm and why it was that I chose to do what we had done, changed it from being, okay, they don't know what they're doing, to, oh, they do know what they're doing. And what was very interesting was there was a newspaper article that came out about 3 or 4 months later, turning around and saying that the same senators that had been there, you know, basically expressing a lot of displeasure, turned around, ran up. One of them actually turned around and grabbed me, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "You have no idea how much nicer my job has been now that they feel that Metro North is back working in the right direction." So I would turn around and say my greatest advocacy is, one, being very open, candid, and approachable. And the other end of it is that when you turn around and give the information and at least explain, even if you've had to explain something that didn't go quite right, but you explain to them what your decision process was, you end up not having the uh, negative feedback coming in. And you're able to, again, address things in a way that you're hopeful that the public understands that everything you're doing is to be good stewards with the public's money and provide the best service that you can.
Thank you for that. Not only a beautiful story, but kind of a perfect example of our why power, why we do this, who we do this for. We do this for the customers. We do this for the public. We do need to be good stewards of the public's funding. And in cases where there might be some frustration or some anger, meeting people where they're at and having that foresight and perception to kind of mitigate any further things happening by just acknowledging that sentiment and being transparent and open about the information. I think that's excellent, and that's really getting to the heart of what we're talking about today, which is the customer experience and how we can improve it. So I thank you for that. And off of this, I'd like to kind of pivot and ask Alicia. Alicia, can you give us a little bit of information about yourself, and can you talk about your role in the customer experience unit?
Sure. Thank you so much, Alicia. And thank you so much for having me today. I am truly honored to be here alongside the commissioner and alongside you, Alicia. Very happy to be here. And so, yeah, I could definitely talk about my role here in the customer experience unit. So, right now, I'm the supervising planner for the unit, and I lead a small but mighty team of two at the moment. And, I started with the agency about 9 years ago. And I started as a trainee, a transportation planner trainee. And the first project I got to work on was the launch of CT Fast Track. And I have to say that that really ignited my love for public transit. And ever since then, I've really just had a passion for, improving public transportation. And I really see the value in what it can do for people. So it's really been a wonderful career here. I'm so happy and thrilled to be leading this team. And I hope to one day have, a fraction of the illustrious career the commissioner has had. So it's been really great and just happy to be here.
Thank you, and we're happy to have you here. And so, I'm going to kind of pose this question to the commissioner, but and Alicia, either one of you. But what was the catalyst for the formation of this customer experience unit?
I'm gonna jump in on that. I want to express the fact that one of your jobs when you come in and you're taking on a management role is to identify the strengths that people have and making sure that those strengths are applied in the best way possible. Alicia was working directly in the commissioner's office, but there was a request at the time that she bring her skill set back over to public trans, and it was recognized that she actually had an ability to go and lead that going forward. And where she talks about, and I got the subtle dig that we could use a few more people in the customer experience unit, but like everything else, you match budgets going forward. But the catalyst, you heard her briefly mention, some of the things that were going on. I came back in here, and one, we were down quite a few members of the team, both on the operating side and on the engineering side. And you had to take a look at, what were the needs going forward. And one of the first meetings I had with the legislature, where there were some legislators that did not express the overwhelming support, for example, dealing with our bus rapid transit system, which I found to be absolutely fantastic. I wish we had had that when we were doing some of the startups, both down in Florida and even when I was a superintendent dealing with, some of the criticism back in the 80s about whether or not we should have these feeder lines going into the main line. So what you're looking for, at that time was the fact that I could have a legislature turn around and say nobody is riding those buses meant that they weren't seeing the reports that were getting out there about how the ridership was growing. The fact that students could get onto a bus at their dorm and be taken right into downtown Hartford, and they could do their schoolwork, their if they had employment, or for that better matter, if they even wanted to go out socialize, they didn't have to get into a car. They could jump right on a bus at a station that resembled a train station and use that to go right back to their dorms. And that message had to get out. And as we were realizing that at the same time that you have to make sure that everybody in your legislature understands, because you need the legislative support to be able to draw down the federal funds that are coming in. So when we talk about the customer experience unit, our customers are the customers that are out there riding our systems, whether the buses or the trains, or for that matter, the ferry boats. Okay. And the experience, the customer experience unit, I had been very, very used to turning around and not only communicating with the customers, but someday I hope to be able to talk a little bit more about the fact that down in Florida, I was trying desperately to create a regional authority. the way that we got that regional authority created was through working with the Regional Business Alliance, the 3 editorial boards, and sending out to over 5,000 customers that sent letters into the legislature demanding that they form a regional authority to be able to go forward. So the power of working with your customer base is not lost on me. So for me, I wanted to make sure that, one, we employed the same type of resources here to make sure that we were communicating in the best way possible. So you look for good communicators. And I'll tell you, Alicia is a very good communicator. Rich Andreski, very good communicator. It's important that we're constantly doing that reach out for the reasons that I started talking to you about in the beginning of this. If you turn around and can keep communicating, what you take away is the misperceptions and the rumors that can sometimes drive an organization, and you're giving out facts. So, having said my end on it, Alicia, do you want to turn around and add something to that?
Sure. Thank you so much, Commissioner, for the kind words. And I do want to add that, one of my hopes for the unit is that we're able to tell the story of public transportation and tell it from the customer's perspective. And I think there's a larger story out there about public transit that maybe gets lost. And I think that's one of my big goals, right? Is to advocate for the customer and advocate for public transit, and what it does for communities and what it does for individuals. And it really does have a ripple effect. Even if you don't use public transit, it does improve communities, it improves lives. And so really that's one of the hopes of this action plan and the unit.
This is great stuff. So let's actually jump into the goals. Let's talk. Alicia, can you give me and our listeners a little bit of insight into the other goals, perhaps that the CX action plan aims to achieve?
Yeah, so we have four main goals with this action plan, and the first one, which is nearest dearest to my heart, is connecting with the customers, and so we're really doing that in a big way, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But really, to connect with the customers who use public transportation, and just to listen and learn about their experience. And then the other goal is really to better understand the changing customer needs. With the pandemic, things have changed, travel patterns have changed, and customer needs and expectations of what they want from public transportation have also changed. And so that's a big goal really, is to connect and then understand, what are customers wanting and what are they are desiring from their public transit system. And then from that, just defining the vision of the future of public transportation based on what we heard, based on customer priorities. And then ultimately create a plan that includes actions that can be taken to achieve that vision, and then making our Connecticut public transportation system more comfortable, reliable, and more efficient experience for everyone. So those are the four main goals, and just really excited to really be getting out there and talking with people.
And I would imagine when a writer is approached, when someone is asked about their experience and ways to improve it, that's always a pretty good feeling. Whether it's on transit or just any service or good that we purchase. When the company asks us how we feel about that or how. What our recommendations are for improving that. It's a nice feeling. It's a nice feeling to be able to contribute some feedback and to feel like the department cares. So I think that's also something that's really important, is that just the gesture itself of reaching out and obtaining this feedback speaks volumes. Even before the words are spoken, the gesture itself speaks volumes in terms of communicating to the customer in many different ways that we do care and that we do want their feedback. So how are you reaching out to riders across the state? What ways are you utilizing to conduct this outreach?
We're actually reaching out to writers in a multitude of ways. And really, what we wanted to do was make it very easy for people to interact with us. So we have a variety of ways where people could just chat with us and tell us their experience using public transportation. We do have a website, transitcx.com. So on the website, you can fill out a survey. You can just drop us a line. So it's very easy to connect with us. We also are doing a social media campaign. So we do that through our DOT social media. And my favorite part of this effort, and we've been really, very excited about this, is we've been going out and doing a lot of pop ups. So we've been tabling at bus stops, transit hubs, rail stations, and community events throughout the state. We've actually done 20 so far, and it's just been really great to get out there. During the pandemic, we weren't going out there. And so just to reconnect with communities and really be out in the world has been great. We have also done stakeholder interviews and community meetings. We've done focus groups with rail, bus, and paratransit riders. And finally, as mentioned, we launched a survey online. And so that survey will be running till September 15th. And we also launched a frontline transit operator survey. So we worked with all of our service providers to help promote an online survey where transit operators can also fill out and give us our feedback. And so it's been great. And then, both surveys, you have a chance to win a $75 gift card for filling out the survey. So just really happy to provide a multitude of ways where people can give us the feedback.
That is great. Who doesn't love a gift card? People love
Exactly.
gift. Yeah, it's a great way to incentivize, and it sounds like a very comprehensive strategy to reach out to people in a variety of ways, and to reach out to multiple stakeholders and multiple groups. And I have to say that I personally attended several of these pop-ups and had the opportunity to interact with some of our customers and our riders, or just interested parties. And that's, I think, the other thing is, perhaps this would incentivize people that are not currently utilizing transit to ride transit or try, especially when they see the department out there in the community, making connections and collecting this feedback. And I had a very positive experience in the pop up, and talking to people, talking to riders, getting their feedback. It was very positive, very positive, even if riders were making suggestions to routes, or giving us feedback about things that they'd like to see improved. It had a very positive vibe. So just want to throw that out there, that I had the opportunity and the honor to actually be a part of these pop-ups, and it was a really good experience. So Commissioner, I'd like to pivot back to you. We've talked a lot about the outreach and about the goals, some of the background into how this program came to be. So what is your hope now moving forward with regard to the data that's gathered during this outreach phase of the initiative?
Well, Alicia, there's a couple of things because right now we are in a pivotal time. For a while there, the industry had remained static. You knew the rules, you knew when the rush hours were. Basically, it was 6 to 9 in the morning and 4 to 7 in the afternoon. And then we had to extend those rush hours slightly. Then all of a sudden, there was a major shift with a lot of the companies, particularly in the major cities, where they were going to 3-day, 12-hour shifts and 4-day, 10-hour shifts. And along comes a pandemic, and we're now dealing with a hybrid situation where we've watched a slow return, but nevertheless a return that's starting to get stronger and stronger as you read the articles about how many businesses are now they're dealing with hybrid, but they want people in 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 4 days a week. So what we're all dealing with as an industry is what is what in particular is going on in our area. So I spend a lot of time all the way through the pandemic on a 7 state call, particularly focusing in on Boston and New York, and what we saw in terms of the return to businesses coming in and how that it was affecting the riders that were out there in terms of what were now our new patterns. So what I'm hoping to get out of this is that we get a little bit more insight into what the needs are that are out there. I've been very, very impressed with our DOT here because even though it's divided between the engineering side and the transit side, it's almost equally divided, and both sides help each other go through it. We recognize that whether or not we're doing a bridge on public trans, our engineering department is there to go and help them. I'm dealing with the fact that right now, the speeding that is going on the highway, the horrific speeds that are out there, and the horrific accidents that they've caused because people got used to there not being a lot of cars on the highway and turning around and driving at extremely high speeds. And now that the highways are back, I actually need to get a focus on to what it will be to get people to start, leaving their cars once again and get onto public transit. Metro North is close to 70% in terms of the ridership coming back. Our Hartford line is even doing better than that. Shoreline East, we just added electric service on. We're seeing that. We're very hopeful that that will again get people to where they want to go and take those trains, and especially where you'll be able to take them and not have to change seats going down. So, what I'm looking at when we looked at even where we're going to put our housing going forward, because people want to live in livable, workable communities. So, are we making sure that everywhere that we're investing into public housing, that we're making sure that we provide the connectors that get them to places of employment or places of transfer onto rail systems? So, what I am looking for is the feedback from when you people express what it is that they would like to see, and then we're able to take that information and translate it out at a time that we know there's going to be a lot of change in our industry. And we now have to know that we're meeting those needs that are out there. So there's a lot that I'm looking for from this as it goes forward. And like I said, we are truly in a time of change that we have to turn around and understand what our new market is going to be and how do we meet the demands that are out there.
And I feel like that's something that we've talked about a lot in this podcast is, the change, the changing times, how we adjust and how we adapt. And I'm glad that you mentioned as well that everything is integrated. At some point in time, macro decisions affect, micro decisions affect macro outcomes, and everything is all one. And we are one DOT, whether or not we're the Bureau of Public Transportation or we're working on the highways, we all at some point in time, intersect and are one DOT. So thank you for kind of reminding us of the broader perspective and how this initiative fits into that. Alicia, we touched on this a little bit before, but how has the response been so far to this action plan and to the customer experience outreach? Are people excited to engage with DOT staff regarding their experience on public transportation and as a transit rider? I've personally found that people were very positive and forthcoming. But has that been your experience? And can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And so, Alicia, yeah, to your point, it's been overwhelmingly positive, and I think it's been positive on both sides. It's been positive, with the customers. They really do have some great feedback to provide, and it's been a lot of fun. And then from our perspective, being out there and hearing the impact that public transportation makes on customers is motivating. It really helps us do our jobs better. So there are so many benefits to us getting out there and talking with customers. And, it's funny. It's like when you ask people, what are your thoughts? Sometimes you do have to peel the onion, right? So it's been a lot of fun kind of, getting that information from people and asking them, how is your experience? What do you really like? And then tell us something that you would want improved. And then you see people open up and they give us a wealth of information. And it's been a great experience. Similarly to the commissioner, I really do like getting out there and talking with the customers. And I think it goes a long way to be candid. It goes a long way to listen and actively listen to people and hear what they have to say. And so, overall, very positive experience. I'm really happy, Alicia, that you've been able to join us. And I just think that this is something that I would love to see continued, and something that we do on a regular basis because there's so much value in it. There's value on both sides, whether it's with the customers and with the DOT team. I mean, we've even had volunteers from all over the department join us at pop ups. So we've had volunteers from our maintenance divisions, we've had volunteers from engineering that have gone out and joined us. And so it's all around been a very great experience so far.
It's nice to hear. And when the customer engagement and data gathering is completed later this fall, what are the next steps? What will be the next steps to complete the plan? And what is the anticipated timeline moving forward?
Yeah, so we do plan to slow down the outreach probably around October. And then we're really going to start doing a deep dive into all this great data we got. So we're getting data from the surveys, we're getting data from being out at pop ups, focus groups, and we really want to take the time to really to do the deep dive and see what are the emerging trends, what are we hearing from customers, and then start to think about at a statewide level what we can do to improve. And, the department is already doing a lot of great things. And I think, a lot of the things that we are doing are going to nicely align with what we heard. And a part of this action plan is to communicate that in a clear way. Tell our customers this is what we are doing as a department. And then also start to think about other programs and policies that we can create to answer for what we heard. And so for the timeline, the expected timeline is to have a draft action plan out early in 2023 for customers, stakeholders, really to review and provide feedback on, and then have a finalized action plan in 2023. And then, this will be something that we build upon. And so I'm really looking forward to this being the start of many, many great action plans that we can really start doing some great stuff out there.
So that's great. So we're looking at next year, a draft, and then later on in the year, a finalized action plan. Once that action plan is completed, what is next for the customer experience unit? Or should I say, what is the vision and how does this mission continue even after the action plan has come to fruition? And Alicia, I ask you, but Commissioner, please feel free to join in as well.
So, really, what comes next is that this becomes a normal part of what we do. And so, I mentioned earlier that, my vision for the unit is that we continue this feedback loop. This isn't the only time we're going to gather feedback. This is going to be something that we do on a regular basis. And also going out there and talking to customers and getting us engaged in person is something that I want to continue to do. And as mentioned before, building upon this action plan. So we have, a large public transportation system. We're looking at it at a statewide level. And so what I want to do is continue to build upon this and then also engage with groups that we didn't have a chance to this round. There are many stakeholders when it comes to public transportation and many interests. So chatting with businesses and community groups and taking it a step further in terms of engagement. So those are just some of the things that I hope will come out of this and I hope that comes next.
So, Alicia, from my end, it's a combination of things. First, when you say when it's completed, the customer experience units are never complete. It's dynamic. It constantly changes, and it's not something that you do now and then you forget about, or you just develop one plan. We'll constantly be modifying it going forward. And one of the reasons to even continue it into the fall is that historically, and we don't know if that's the rules anymore, but we used to be down 25% of our ridership in the summer months because people took that time off to be with their children. So we're experiencing a new way of looking at things. But the other things that I want to share as we talk about what do we do with this knowledge going forward. I've been involved in public trans for over 50 years. I've never had the type of infusion of infrastructure money that I've seen on both the highway and the public trans side as I've seen in the last year. So I've got a governor that is constantly asking us, how do we safely improve the service that's out there? How do we get faster times going on our rail systems, whether or not it's increasing our services going out to Rhode Island, whether or not we'll ever even increase the service all the way to Massachusetts. The fact that we're trying to run express trains now that have cut off anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes going into New York. The fact that we have a great partnership with Metro North, with Amtrak, with TASI, and the fact that, as we're looking at all these things, we look at, how is it that when the feds are providing opportunities for a lot of money, that we have a state that will turn around and, again, our representatives giving us the matching funds to be able to draw that money in. So where it used to be that everything we did, we measured in terms of how can we afford to go and do that going forward and be utilizing the money in the best way possible. We now have to look at it from the standpoint that, how many projects can we take on at the same time? Are we making sure that when, we're looking at housing, that we're doing it in a way that we provide access to that housing? Are we doing all the right things going forward? So for me, it's an overall look at opportunities that were not here before. The fact that we spent maybe a good 10 to 20 years in the past not getting projects completed because we had to do it based on budget that was coming in and not being able to have the money to go and complete projects. And now we're seeing projects getting completed. We're seeing more and more projects going out in the street, and a great partnership as well with the contracting community that's out there. So when you talk about what happens next when we get this plan, we look at the plan, we modify the plan, we go out for the next phase of the plan, we go out and see how has it changed and what else are we going to need to do as we go forward to go and meet the public's expectation, at the same time making sure that the one message that's always been clear is safety is our prime motivator, and knowing who our customer is and making sure that we're doing everything we can to meet those customer expectations.
Thank you for that. And I think it's evident there's several themes that have continued to echo throughout this episode, and of course safety is always our priority, and here we are talking about setting a precedent for future continual collection of customer feedback and proposed improvements to the transit service to continue to plan new routes and new services to the public. And I think that's just phenomenal. Commissioner, I think you mentioned, we're kind of seeing things through a new lens now, whether it be new partnerships or, increased funding, even transit planning that considers housing and evaluating all of these different opportunities. So I thank both of you for the opportunity to speak about some of these wonderful themes. And, I do hope that we continue to talk about this on this podcast. And Commissioner, you had mentioned a short while ago about perhaps the opportunity to speak a little bit more and elaborate on the regional authority that you had mentioned in Florida. So we may need to have you back for another episode. We'd love to have you back. And Alicia, we'd love to have you back at some point in time to talk about the data collected from this, initial round of customer outreach, and, kind of evaluate and learn about some of the trends that you saw once all of this data is processed. So that's your semi-official, semi-formal invitation
I'll be
to both
there.
of you to come back.
I'd
So
welcome the opportunity.
thank you. So, Alicia, as we close out this episode, can you provide our listeners with information about how they can take part in this exciting new initiative?
Absolutely. So there's a variety of ways that you can provide feedback and provide us with your input. One of the ways is to visit us at transitcx.com. We have a feedback form on there. You can also email us at dot.transitcx@ct.gov. You can leave us a voicemail at 860-594-3618. And of course, you can even write us a letter and send it directly to the DOT. So we will take feedback in a variety of forms. And I just wanted to mention, we want to hear from everyone. So even if you don't ride public transportation and you maybe would like to, or you ride infrequently, please drop us a line.
That is really important to note. So, you've heard it, listeners. Even if you are not a transit rider, but you'd like to participate in this effort, we welcome all feedback. And no worries, if you didn't catch some of that contact information, we will have all of it within the episode notes of this podcast episode on our website, along the lines ct.com. So, this is very exciting. It's been a phenomenal conversation, and I would like to encourage all of our listeners to check out the website, provide some feedback, and I look forward to seeing the results of this feedback and the customer experience action plan. And am hopeful that perhaps we can have the Commissioner and Alicia return on a future episode to discuss some of that data. So, please be on the lookout for that. I would like to thank our guests once again, Commissioner Joseph Giulietti and Alicia Leite from the Connecticut Department of Transportation. I am Alicia Gonzalez. Please join us next time for another episode of Along the Lines.